Okay, so some of you know that there's been a recent scandal involving $1 billion of uh, stolen money, taxpayer money in Minnesota, largely from the Somali community. And Trump said, you know, Ilhan Omar is a garbage person. Those are the words he used, and that Somalia is a garbage country. If you remember, in the past, he's used words like, this country is a shithole and so on. So before I specifically address this, the Somalia comment in terms of its substance, I just wanted to read for you something that I wrote earlier today. It's a long thread, so I'm going to read it for you, and I want you to think about it as I go through it. So here we go. In the parasitic mind, I explained that the aversion that people have toward Donald Trump stems from stylistic matters. I coined this as an aesthetic injury. For example, when he states that Ilhan Omar is garbage, the bien-pensants get offended at such language. If he states that Somalia is a garbage nation, people get offended and point to it being an instantiation of bigotry. Trump uses shortcut linguistic heuristics that at times exhibit, quote, lack of presidential decorum, close quote. But the content of what he says might be nonetheless accurate. Let us take his evaluation of Somalia. As a professor, I could phrase his, quote, garbage comment as follows, quote, this is if I am presenting the information on Somalia. Somalia is a country wherein personal liberties do not flourish. Its GDP is astoundingly low. It is ruled by religious fervor that does not permit individuals to practice their freedom of conscience. Women do not have the freedom to dress as they see fit. Governmental institutions do not work optimally. Corruption is endemic, and I'm going to come back to this and I'm going to give you an analysis. Tribal warlords have ruined the country. Homosexuals cannot live out their lives in peace. Atheists cannot proclaim their lack of belief openly. Many women are subjected to female genital mutilation. Somali society has internalized a set of values that are incongruent with Western liberties, close quotes. So the long quote that I just gave you would be me trying to offer a professorial explanation for why Somalia might not be the model society that we each aspire to emulate. Donald Trump speaks, not that I'm verbose, right? If I'm asked as a professor to offer justifications for why Somalia is useless, I might offer this. Donald Trump just cuts through it and just says garbage. Okay, let me go on. I'm going to keep reading for a bit. I could have continued for another 2,000 words to explain why Somalia does not score very high on any global metric of optimal flourishing, but Trump cuts through those professional details and summarizes it in one word: garbage. I understand that it might be wise to use less, quote, offensive words, but the gist of what he is saying is veridical. I offer the following challenge to the people who are offended, especially the Western progressives. I will personally raise the funds to send you on a fun vacation to Mogadishu, but you have to wear the following t-shirt conspicuously for one day. Quote, Islam is false, I'm a gay Jew, give me a hug. Close quote. Let us know how it turns out. In the United States, you could wear such a t-shirt and live. In Somalia, you can't. Hence his term. Okay, so that's what I mentioned earlier today. But now, as I've often explained to you guys, whenever you're taking a position on something, do your homework. Build the nomological network of cumulative evidence, if you can, that makes your position unassailable. Drown your interlocutor with so much evidence that it becomes impossible for them to engage in emotional incontinence, as every single degenerate Hollywood star and progressive and Democrat is saying, right? Because Trump, for better or worse, does not cross his legs as though his testicles have been cut off, which happens with Justin Trudeau, which happens with Barack Obama, right? You speak in an effeminate manner. You put out your pinky when you're drinking an espresso, right? You emote, you're gentle, you're kind, you're castrated, you're spineless. He doesn't do that, which is now something that is expected of all politicians to do. You have to be an invertebrate castrato to be a politician and be invited to Davos. For better or worse, Trump doesn't do that. But is the gist of what he's saying about Somalia true? Well, there is less evidence that gravity exists than regarding the veracity of his statement. But as I explained, we don't need to, just scream louder than our interlocutor. How about we do an analysis? Well, I have explained this, by the way, in many years ago. I was a professor at University of California, Irvine, at the Graduate School of Management, which has since changed its name to the Paul Merage Business School. But at the time, I was tasked with teaching an MBA course in international marketing. And so I was part international business, part international marketing, part international management. And so at one point I was discussing the cultural differences in the endemic corruption that exists across national borders. And there are a set of cultural values that either make corruption a accepted endemic part of that society or not. That's why cultures are not indistinguishable from each other. That's why cultures are not equivalent. That's why cultures are not equal, right? There are many, many human universals that make all human identical to each other in the sense that they share a biological heritage, but there are an astounding number of cross-cultural differences. Just go on Google Scholar and enter cross-cultural difference, and you will get 33 trillion hits, because psychologists and anthropologists and sociologists and other behavioral scientists have studied endless ways by which cultures vary. One of which is how internalized is corruption within that society. Before I give you the data on beautiful, noble, honest Somalia, let me give you a personal story, okay? Because oftentimes people remember well. One of the reasons why, well, I'd like to think one of many reasons, but one of the reasons why I resonate so much with people is that I take theoretical explanations and then I marry them to personal narratives to make them come alive. So let me give you a personal story. When we first moved from Lebanon to Canada, my father had received a few parking tickets and he was pissed. And so he went around and said, can somebody know who is the specific policeman that I have to, slip some bakshish so that we could finish with the story? Because, he thought that, this is how it's done in Lebanon. That's how it's done in the Middle East, right? There's always an institutional mechanism of bakshish. You want the customs agent to go a bit easier on you? Bakshish. You want the cop to not give you? Bakshish. Of course, then that becomes an issue when you're doing international trade, because what is considered bakshish and okay in one society is completely illegal, say in the United States. And there are some very interesting international legal issues which I had lectured about back then when I was teaching the MBA students. But just to finish my story with my dad, and I'm not trying to denigrate my dad. He is a product of the culture that he comes from. And so when he asked, so who's the cop that I've got to grease here and finish with the story? And the person to whom he was asking the question said, well, this is not how it's done over here. We don't do that over here. And his answer, which is in the lore of the Saad family, he said, well, what kind of barbaric society is this where you can't do this? So again, think about what I just said. From my dad's perspective, the fact that you couldn't solve the problem by going to the cop in question, coming to some understanding, and therefore you could now park wherever you want, was insane, was barbaric. The fact that you had these rules that you can't, navigate across smelled of barbarism. Now imagine this very inconsequential case multiplied by every single interaction in society at every level, and then you get failed states. Are you with me? Hello? Are you listening? Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this thing, it's called data. Okay? It's called reality. Okay? I'm going to let that decide whether his statement that Somalia is a garbage country. Again, I would not have used those terms, right? But he has a different style. And therefore, let's see if the substance, the substantive content of what he said is veridical or not. You ready? So I went to my buddy Grok and I asked, because I could have sat there and went to the Corruption Perceptions Index. It's called CPI, which is published annually by Transparency International for the past exactly 30 years, since 1995. And I could have calculated each year that Somalia is on the list where it ranks. But I just asked Grok, could you tell me the average rank of Somalia for each of the years that the Corruption Perception Index has been calculated? Are you ready? You're listening? So now take this data and share it with Ben Stiller, Jewish Ben Stiller, who was so hurt. This is not who we are. We don't, I ate at a Somali restaurant, or maybe he doesn't know that Somalia is different from Ethiopia. And, I loved it and they were so kind to me. So don't be mean, okay? So Somalia only entered the rankings starting in 2005. Okay, are you with me? The rankings began in 1995, but Somalia came in 2005. For each of the years, I'm going to give you the rank of what Somalia was ranked. So if you were ranked first, that means you are the least corrupt, okay? And then as you go down the rank, you're worse. And so I'm going to give you first, what's the rank of Somalia out of how many countries were ranked that year? So for example, 2005, Somalia ranked 154th out of 159 countries, okay? Why don't you get a pen and paper and jot it down? 2005, 154 rank out of 159. 2006, 142 out of 163. 2007, 147 out of 179. 2008, 170 out of 180. We're starting to suck really badly. 2009, 171 out of 180. 2010, they outdid themselves. They ranked the most corrupt nation in the world, 178 out of 178. In 2011, they ranked 182 out of 182. In 2012, they really pulled their socks up and they ranked 174 out of 176. In 2013, 177th out of 177. In 2014, they were tied for last place out of 175 countries. In 2015, they ranked last place out of 168 countries. In 2016, 170 out of 176. 2017, 176 out of 180. Now this, they're going to really do well. You ready? In 2017, 176 out of 180. And now World Championship. In 2018, 180 out of 180. 2019, 180 out of 180. 2020, 180 out of 180. 2021, 180 out of 180. 2022, 180 over 180. 2023, 180 over 180. And then in 2024, they really pulled those reins. They really pulled their socks up. They scored an admirable 179 out of 180. And so Grok was kind enough to calculate their average ranking, which was 180.8 as their average ranking, which ranks them as the singular worst country in the world out of 180 countries ranked. So when Donald Trump uses the term garbage country, he doesn't know about the CPI, but he lives in the real world. He has a sense of whether, when we are looking at models of society, whether we should emulate Somalia or whether Somalia doesn't do very... Now, does that stop the fact that there are endless Somalis who are perfectly lovely and will invite you for a nice meal? Both statements hold true. Yes, I could play soccer with a lovely Somali who might be my best friend, and it absolutely holds true that Somalia is a degenerate society. It cuts off the clitorises of women. Does that make it a garbage society or a great society? It kills gays. There are no Jews in Somalia. There are no Christians in Somalia. There is no freedom of speech in Somalia. There is no criticizing Islam in Somalia. There are no governmental institutions in Somalia. No metric on which you judge the health and flourishing of a society does Somalia not score either last or close to last at. But see, what I just spent doing in the last 16 minutes takes a lot of effort. Thinking is hard, right? Engaging my cognitive system is so hard. It's so much easier to go on CNN and with that guy, Rachel Maddow, and scream and huff and puff that Donald Trump is a racist. He's Islamophobic. Did I mention at all the word Islam when now giving you the CPI data? I didn't, right? Cultures have values. Those values have downstream consequences that then orient the entire way by which people navigate through their societies. What made the United States great, what made the West great, is that they came up with the magic sauce that allowed, regrettably, the dark heart of human beings to be quelled. Therefore, we had societies that had high trust, where you can trust that the government can't come to your house and take you away in the middle of the night, where they can't trump up charges against you, where they can't do all the things that throughout all of history has been the normal thing, or as we say in French, de rigueur, okay? Somalia is a failed society that is not racist, that's not Islamophobic, that's not bigoted, that's not xenophobic. Nothing could be further from the truth. If Somalia is a beautiful society, which we should all aspire to live by, then we should see in consumer behavior, we know that if you buy product A, 95% buy product A, nobody buys product B. The market has spoken. People don't like product B. It has bad quality. It has bad after-purchase service. It has bad whatever it is by which we judge that product, right? So we do vote with our feet. We do vote with our wallet. So when Somalis are desperately trying to come to the United States and not the other way around, that is making a statement that the United States is a astoundingly superior society than Somalia. Nothing could be clearer. But the world that we live in causes most people, including most moronic Americans, to feel uncomfortable saying that, right? I feel icky saying that Somalia is a worse society than United States. I want to believe in cultural relativism. I want to believe in multiculturalism, which says, who are you, racist, to judge the norms, the ways of another society? Now, if you take a society, which I just gave you incontrovertible data, astoundingly unequivocal data, that it ranks absolutely by far as the most corrupt nation in the world, and you bring in hundreds of thousands of people, do you think that corruption in the host society where they've come in, stemming from these new, quote, immigrants or refugees, will corruption go up, stay the same, or go down? If you have to bet the house on it, which one do you think it would be? Oh my God, you mean if you bring in hundreds of thousands of people from a society that has scored dead last for 20 years in an unbelievably non-partisan scientific methodology that ascribes to them the most corrupt society, that you're going to get more corruption in the United States to the tune of $1 billion? Many of the people that are listening now, I don't know how many are listening, I have no idea. But many of the people who are listening got up, went to work, worked hard, did double shifts, did triple shifts to make a better life for themselves. Then the government came along and said, hey, that money you make is mine. Now I'm going to divert that money to whatever scam is being pulled by Somalis in Minnesota to the tune of $1 billion. Does the taxpayer have a right to be angry at that? Or is that bigoted? Does the taxpayer have a right to say, you know, some cultures are inherently less likely to assimilate within the high trust civil society that we have? Is that bigoted? Is that phobic? Is that xenophobic? Or is it called I'm wedded to reality? Have a good night, everybody.